All right, I think we are live now. I can only see the presentation, but thanks for joining us. Before we jump into the topic at hand on craft lagers, wanted to do some quick intros just so you know who you're talking to. So I'm Colleen Quinn. I'm joined with Brian Quinn, my brother and the co-founder of Second Sip Beverage Consulting. We started Second Sip a couple months ago, aiming to offer kind of full service consulting services tailored to, craft beverage creators' needs, help them navigate such a dynamic industry with so much opportunity going on, and really hope to kind of bring our collective expertise to many other craft brewery clients out there. In terms of our experience, from my perspective, I spent most of my craft career at Craft Brew Alliance, leading strategy, mergers and acquisitions, and then running some of the acquired brands that I had led the acquisitions of. And then, ironically, we got scooped up by Anheuser-Busch. So I was on both sides of the acquisition side of things and spent a few months post-acquisition at AB InBev running strategy for their craft business unit. So really excited to talk about this topic because I think I have a unique perspective, having been on the big beer side as well as on the craft side of things, and really looking at a lot of different breweries, trying to pursue craft lagers in different fashions. So really excited to jump into this. But before we do, Brian, do you want to give a little bit of your background?
Yeah, sure thing. Just real quick on some of my background. I somehow found my way into the craft beer world after going to grad school for history, briefly working in investment banking, and then just kind of diving in and diving into the world of craft beer. Initially through working a lot of entry level jobs and more on the brewing side of the industry. At some smaller craft breweries in North Carolina. Eventually, I decided to take the plunge a little bit deeper and did the Siebel Brewing Master Brewer program back in 2015. Came back and worked for a larger regional craft brewery after completing that program. Got my advanced Cicerone a couple of years ago. I've always been very big into the education side of the industry, and currently I am serving as the director of brewery operations at Town Brewing Company in Charlotte, North Carolina. Excited to be working with my sister on Second Sip to offer our consulting services to craft beverage makers across the country. I think definitely our respective backgrounds are, certainly very, very balanced and, allow us to kind of really attack a wide range of challenges and within the craft beer world. So, yeah, excited to dive into this conversation today about craft lagers. I know I'm sipping on one right now, so.
Cheers. Hope you guys are all sipping on one as well if you have the opportunity. But we'll dive right in on the topic of, can craft lagers compete with big beer? The way we're going to approach the next little bit is we're going to first start by framing the lager opportunity and really what's at stake out there. We'll overview a few approaches that we're seeing in craft beer on how breweries are tackling lagers, and from our vantage point, what the major keys to success are. And then because, we want to base everything in reality, we felt like the bulk of our time talking through some case studies to really bring those keys to success to life in some real life examples would be the best use of time. So not all of those examples will be, runaway successes, but I think they all give us something to learn from as we think about how we can approach the lager opportunity out there. And then, of course, wrapping up with any questions and hopefully having some good time at the end in case there's any questions and discussion we want to have. So jumping in, with a title like Can Craft Beer Compete with Big Beer? I think it's always important to frame what the battle is that we're up against when you think about craft versus big beer. It's continues to be a David versus Goliath story. Craft is only 12% of total beer. On the flip side, when you look on the right-hand side, the top 10 beers, which are all macro lagers and big beer owned lagers, are collectively over 50% of total US beer sales. And Bud Light alone is about the size of the entire craft industry. So the 8,000 craft breweries are all, collectively making up that 12%, are all collectively selling as much beer as Bud Light sells. So it's certainly a lofty goal when we talk about how craft is positioned to compete with big beer. But without a doubt, we have to think about it as a share game and think about, how we're stealing share, how we're looking at opportunities to win more consumers over, and steal, consumption from some of these big brands. And, from our vantage point, one of the big ways for craft to do that is through lager, because the lager opportunity is huge. Nearly 75% of all beer sold in the United States, according to IRI, is lager. So that's, 3 out of every 4 beers consumed or sold is a lager beer. But when you look within craft beer, that's only 10% of the craft beer market is lagers. And that, spans a variety of sub-styles classified by IRI here as American dark or tropical lagers, tropical being some of the Mexican lagers popping up. Not a perfect science always with some of the IRI data, but any way you slice it, when you're looking at the fact that only 1 out of every 10 craft beers sold is a lager and, 3 out of all 4 beers consumed are lagers, I think that in and of itself, paints the picture of just how much run room there is for craft to penetrate this style a little bit more and appeal to a broader consumer base. And really, the way we think about it is lagers give us an opportunity to target different consumption occasions that craft really isn't top of mind for consumers in. The common thread with a lot of these occasions that you see here are, off-premise, longevity, a lot of outdoor drinking, day drinking. So whether it's by a pool, on the beach, at a tailgate, lawnmower beers, those are occasions that are historically dominated by big beer and by these macro lagers, and really craft isn't playing as aggressively in those spaces. And those are situations where, we're leaving, sales on the table for sure, by not, having offerings that can appeal to consumers in those. But then, also want to acknowledge that, from a craft perspective, there's also a taproom play. So we note that the commonality with a lot of these occasions is longevity, and a goal that a lot of us have is to keep people around in our tap rooms for longer, right? And having a lighter, more sessionable lager on draft can be a good, offering in your tap room, adds variety to, what you have on the menu board. And, somebody might get drained after 1 or 2 IPAs, but if that lager being on your menu can keep them around for 1 additional drink, that's good for us in that setting as well. So it can play both in those, craft centric occasions like drinking in a tap room, but also these occasions that are, historically dominated by big beer. And we're in no way saying that, craft lagers can steal, all of the consumption in these occasions. There's always going to be consumers that associate Corona with the beach, or, Bud Light with a tailgate. And, we're not going to win everyone over, but unless we're giving them an offering to even play and compete, we're not going to win any of those folks over. So certainly some upside there, and an opportunity to put craft more top of mind in different occasions for consumers. But, we'll acknowledge that, this isn't a completely new news for any of you guys. Craft and as an industry isn't ignoring the opportunity. So we've seen, pretty substantial growth, 6% compound annual growth over the last 5 years for craft lagers. You can see it split across the different subsegments based on the IRI data here. So the big growth engine being the American lagers, that's a lot of the light craft lagers, really playing more directly in competing with big beer that we'll talk quite a bit about. Whereas some of the more traditional dark lagers, Vienna lagers, et cetera, have been a little bit more on the decline during that same time period. So it's not just about generically playing in lager, but about making sure that we've got the right offering to capitalize on the trends and really go head to head with the type of consumer and type of product that they're looking for in those occasions. So, when you look at that 6% growth, that's nearly double what the reported craft growth is in IRI. So certainly lagers growing at a clip above the rest in terms of case sales here. So big opportunity. We're not ignoring it, but we want to talk obviously in more detail about how we can capitalize that. And so, back to that question of really, we painted this David and Goliath picture. We said, we're only 10% lagers. Can we really compete with big beer? And, without a doubt, that's one angle to look at the lager opportunity with us. But I think as we're all evaluating the way to approach this style for ourselves and for our breweries, the real question is, can craft lagers be successful? Are they a beer, or are they a tool within your portfolio that can help you grow your business and be a part of your strategy for the long term? And if we look at it as, can we grow our businesses through craft lagers, then inherently we'll be stealing some share from some of the declining big beer brands. But first and foremost, we got to make sure that the strategy works for us and that it fits kind of what we're trying to do in growing our respective businesses. As we look at the lager space overall in craft, we see, kind of three different lager approaches by our assessment. The first being, what we think of as core craft lagers. So, like I said, lagers aren't new to craft brewers. It's not like we've been living under a rock. Plenty of craft breweries, especially legacy craft breweries, have been brewing lagers for, the bulk of their existence. Many have, their flagship brand being a lager. But those lagers have just always been kind of a part of the craft ethos and haven't really been as methodically trying to attack the big beer opportunity like we're framing here. And so the other two approaches that we'll talk more about are what we refer to as kind of the lower priced lookalikes. So trying to compete with big beer on price, trying to go with more kind of retro or nostalgic or patriotic sometimes graphics to look more like some of those macro lagers, and really as an opportunity for us to, steal share from some of those declining domestic premium brands. And the third approach is the Mexican lagers, right? Mexican import brands, Corona, Modelo, have been growing like crazy. And, craft isn't sleeping on that opportunity either. We've been able to introduce plenty of Mexican lagers in hopes of trying to capitalize on the growth that some of those brands are seeing. And so we see that as another way to kind of play with the big guys and compete in that space. We also want to acknowledge that even big beer owned craft is playing in this space. I pulled some AB InBev examples here, and across kind of each of these approaches, they have offerings, whether it's, Vienna Lager from Devil's Backbone. Devil's is a lager centric brewery, and they've been doing lagers really well for a long time in a very traditionally craft sense. From a lower priced lookalike, 10 Barrels Pub Beer is probably the largest beer playing with this strategy and driving, incremental volume through that. And that's with them only being a regional craft brand, already the largest playing with this strategy. And then a slew of Mexican lagers, including kind of this lineup from Karbach. And the reason, I hit on this is not just because Brian and I like to argue about this topic quite a bit, but because I think it validates that even big beer acknowledges that craft has a role to play in lager. And, I can tell you coming from AB that they think about share constantly, and they would always rather lose share to themselves than to a competitor. So they're pushing their craft breweries to compete in this place, and they're seeing the opportunity to try to maintain more of their consumers by giving a greater variety of offerings that still appeal to kind of the need state that those consumers have, even if they're starting to flee away from some of their bigger older brands. And I think it also validates that this is a strategy that can work for craft. We see it working for some of these guys, and in many ways they're exemplifying some of the approaches here. So we will hit on a couple examples that are big beer owned that we think do highlight some of those keys to success, because at the end of the day we should be learning from kind of whoever's doing some of these things well or not so well, so that we can apply those learnings to our own business. And so speaking of kind of the keys to success and what it takes to be successful, we didn't want to bury the lead. So we want to frame these 5 keys to success as we see them up front, and then we'll bring them to life as we talk through some of the case studies and examples. So kind of hitting one by one through this. First and foremost, when we see breweries being successful in craft lagers, they're being intentional about the role and positioning that it plays within their portfolio. What we mean by that is really intentional about how they're branding these products and really thinking about how these products are going to drive incremental sales for them. So we're not self-cannibalizing ourselves. They're not, so off kilter with everything that these breweries are about. The second key to success is understanding the consumers of lagers. In many ways, the vast majority of the lager consumers are not core craft consumers. Certainly, some of our core craft consumers are drinking lagers, including some of those macro lagers in certain occasions. But when we think about our normal consumer and the things that are most important to them when they're reaching for, a hazy IPA or, an awesome stout, it's a very different need state and very different consumption reason when they're picking up a lager, whether that's going to be one of our craft lagers or one of the macro ones. So really understanding the distinct needs that they have and why they're picking up those beers is really critical to make sure that we're crafting a product that's going to meet those needs and be compelling for them in those occasions. Next is considering the implications for your retailers. A lot of craft breweries are taproom centric or just starting to get out into distribution. Others have been, distributing, out to retailers for a lot longer. But the reality is, retailers are a little bit, some of them are a little bit confused by this trend. They're used to kind of the price points for their macro beers, their price points and margins for craft beers. And when you think about positioning a product that's kind of in between there, or maybe trying to steal share from some of their, bread and butter, high velocity products, they might have some questions and be thinking about it a little bit differently. So really understanding kind of your retailer strategy and how they think about this opportunity, so that when we're pitching these products to them, we can be, not just using some of the stats that I shared at the beginning of the growth that we're seeing and the big opportunity, but we're also thinking about how that can be beneficial for their business as well is really important to make this successful. And we'll hit on, I've personally had some experience with this, so I'll hit on an example that hopefully brings that to life. Being deliberate about pricing, especially for that second approach where we're seeing a lot of craft lagers come in at lower, more competitive price points. In some ways that makes a lot of sense for that offering, but, we have to be mindful of your margins, your distributor's margins, the retailer margins, and really making sure that this is a financially feasible opportunity for you and that you're not just dropping price to get close to those competitive things, but you're doing it in a way that's really going to drive sales and be successful for you. And then finally, considering the operational implications of success. I think often, we think about everything that could go wrong, but I think in this situation, you have to think about what happens when that lager starts selling like crazy and they take longer to brew. So they're going to tie up more tank time, more of your capacity, and making sure that you're ready and able to provide that beer at consistent quality and not run into out of stocks out there. So these are some of the things that, we'll highlight in more detail with some of the examples that we talk about, but we'll keep coming back to them because, if there's one slide that you take away from this presentation, it's probably these things, so that as you go back into your business and think about what this opportunity could be for you, that you're thinking through each of these considerations. So with that, we'll jump back into kind of real life here and start talking about some of the case studies. So we'll talk through 4 examples in this lower priced lookalike category, starting with founders and then hitting on some that are pretty close to home for Brian and I. But starting with founders, they were really one of the first craft breweries to enter into this low priced offering at a national level. So they launched Solid Gold in 2018. First year, it sold gangbusters, over 250,000 cases just in IRI data alone in that first year. Great, significant growth in year 2. They launched this in 15 packs at $14.99 pricing, so really targeting that dollar per beer price point, which makes them very competitive with those macro beers. They subsequently then launched 24 packs. Again, the pack configuration and price point that kind of plays with some of those macro offerings and really going head to head with some of the big beer offerings there. They launched it with kind of a little bit more distinct or retro branding, I think, to fit that offering, but it's still very clearly Founders. They're not diminishing or downplaying the Founders brand within it. And from our vantage point, that's really because, this move was consistent in our perspective with their overall strategy. Founders was already trying to attack some of these longevity occasions with all day IPA, and session IPAs in general was probably, one of the ways in that craft was starting to attack some of those occasions with lower ABV can offerings, different package configurations. And I think they really exemplified kind of what they were doing. So the solid gold offering kind of fit part and parcel with some of the strategy that they were having to go after some of those occasions. Now, they haven't been without, blips and challenges. They did have, sales declines in 2020 and, off to solid gold's off to a rough start here in 2021. But they're still the fourth largest craft American lager when you look within IRI at that style. And certainly one of the larger ones, playing in this strategy. And so from our vantage point, going back to those keys to success, we think that solid gold's a really good example of being intentional about the positioning within their portfolio. Like I said, it really kind of fit that overall strategy that they were, really going heavy on with all day IPA. And then solid gold comes in as another lower ABV sessionable offering that can kind of go hand in hand with that. And being deliberate about pricing. They, even as their sales have struggled a little bit more recently, they have stayed very true and consistent with their strategy of the lower price point, sticking to these price points. Now, they're a larger craft brewery, so the margin situation is likely better for them in this situation, but very clearly as they launch this and as they continue to have it as a top seller out there, they're being really methodical about maintaining that competitive price point. So they're a prime example and an early mover in that first in that strategy of kind of the lower priced lookalikes. Bri, I think you're up next with one of your favorites.
Yeah, I'm actually sipping on one of these right now. We rolled out a new beer this year at Town Brewing Company called Spratt's Premium Lager. This was added to our core beer lineup in the spring of 2021, and it definitely represented kind of a departure from our kind of earlier strategies. This was our first foray into the 12-ounce can format. Certainly, craft seems to have a big love affair with the 16-ounce can format, and up until this point, we had exclusively when we canned product, we were selling it in 16-ounce 4-packs, and we at around the same time, we were talking about how we wanted to brand Spratts, and we already knew that it was going to be in a different can format. And we also knew that we were going to be coming in at a lower price point with this offering compared to the rest of our core beers, the rest of our seasonals, and the rest of our limited releases. As such, we wanted to give it kind of a little bit of distance from the rest of our brand family, and just have a little bit more of a distinct kind of throwback retro feel with the branding. A 6-pack of this beer, and we're also utilizing for the first time with this 6-pack boxes, which is was a packaging choice that we had yet to explore as well. We're typically seeing these priced at $9.99, sometimes $8.99 at retailers, which, while that certainly isn't quite near that $1 per beer price point that Founder Solid Gold is targeting, or certainly not completely in line with the pricing that you see from the big macro domestics. It nevertheless represented a pretty lower price offering compared to the rest of our core beers. Specifically, given some of the the choices and challenges that we made with this brand. This was a beer that I brewed it in my mind 1,000 times before I actually got to put it into tank. I wanted to roll out a year-round lager brand for essentially since we opened town almost 3 years ago. But I was cognizant of the fact that we just simply did not have the capacity to maintain a year-round lager brand with the number of tanks that we had. Furthermore, we don't have a canning line in-house, and we also we work with a wholesaler. We're not self-distributing at this point, so margins were very tight for us. So that $9.99 price point was about as low as we could go, and I'm still kind of we're still kind of fleshing out and assessing if that is the correct price point for this product. I don't know if right now we can really come down given some of the costs associated with this beer, but there's also a chance that we might be just leaving money on the table. The craft consumer isn't extraordinarily price sensitive, certainly in a taproom setting. But when you're at the grocery store and you're perusing the shelves, pricing does become more important. This beer was also brewed with locally malted Pilsner malt and local rice. So the raw materials cost was a little bit higher than we've had with some of our other offerings that don't use exclusively local malt. So that's another added cost that definitely makes our margins on this product very tight, and also means that at the end of the day, this is a volume game. We need to sell a lot of this beer if this is going to be a success story for us. Definitely in March, we found that demand was far exceeding supply, and fortunately, we were able to order a few more tanks to support this brand. Everyone knows all the challenges with logistics and shipping right now, so we have only received 1 out of the 3 new tanks that we've ordered. So we're continuing to kind of really struggle to keep up with demand with this product. But that's certainly, it's a very positive sign that demand for this product is very high and is able to support and justify increased production capacity and expansions this year. We've also been utilizing a mobile canning company, which obviously adds some costs as well. Though we are bringing a canning line into our operation later on this year, which should also significantly help with some of our capacity constraints and definitely, the tight margin concerns with this beer will be, a little bit ameliorated by having a canning line in house. This beer, we definitely see it kind of as a pretty local play. Spratt's is the name of a local historical figure. So we're definitely, we've got a, North Carolina, icon on the can. We're definitely trying to really play up the local aspect of this product while maintaining a pretty decent price point for a craft beverage, especially a craft beverage brewed with exclusively local malt. It's definitely been a bit of a challenge, but one that I think in the long haul is gonna pan out really well for us.
So next up, I'll talk through one of the breweries I worked with and acquired while I was at Craft Brew Alliance, and that's A&B's American Lager. And shout out to founders and the brewers for this beer. It won gold at GABF back in 2017, a little bit before the lager craze in craft really got going. And so we didn't launch this brand beyond the tap room until 2019. It was a fan favorite there, and it was starting to get traction. And We were starting to see some of the examples like Solid Gold enter into this space, and we felt like there was going to be an opportunity to launch this beyond the tap room. So we kind of tested it a little bit in 2019, and then really put the pedal to the metal and made it a higher priority in 2020. A tricky year to shuffle priorities for sure. But with this, we knew we wanted to launch with really distinct branding, a different target consumer. That's, again, why we tried to attack this with kind of that lower price lookalike strategy, initially pricing around $12.99 for 12 packs, though, to be honest, wasn't consistently seeing the same price point reflected everywhere. So I had to go back and forth with our distributors and retailers constantly to kind of get a read on how it was playing at that price point. We saw solid growth for sure and good traction on this, but weren't really able to yet have this breakthrough as one of the top heavy hitters within our portfolio overall. Still only at 4% of A&B's total mix. And some challenges that we were facing, our business at the time, and I imagine still is, very heavily in chain grocery store. That's, the big seller of beer here in North Carolina, and the bulk of our sales going through chain grocery stores. And so, like I said before, one of the buyers at our largest chain was a little bit iffy on the craft lager play, especially the lower priced craft lager play, from a notion of, he has expectations for the amount of revenue and margin that he gets from craft, and why would he want somebody, trading from a Bud Light into an American lager if the margins aren't, substantially better for him. So there was a little bit of, challenge getting into some of our biggest retailers, which made us kind of, think about, all right, do we go with more of an independent route? Do we tackle different channels on this? But ultimately, to have this be a breakthrough success within the portfolio, that was a big gap and a big barrier for us, having this become kind of one of the leaders or flagships within the portfolio. And just like we were saying before, we also were dealing at that price point with pressured margins. So Brian mentioned, needing it to be a volume play when you're dealing with lower margins. And because we weren't getting that chain grocery kind of, massive volume, and we were dealing with the lower margins, we were having to think through kind of, is this the right approach? Do we double down? Do we stick with it? Ultimately, as we were going through planning for 2021, we started to talk about a shift in approach. We're about to go through, and they're now implementing a little bit of a overall rebrand, and that gave us an opportunity to bring the branding of this product more in line with the rest of the portfolio. So they'll be kind of relaunching it soon with a new name and new look. I won't steal their thunder and steal my old team's thunder by sharing what that will be, but they're going to bring it a little bit more in line with the rest of the portfolio, and then lift price a little bit. The thinking there, have it still be lower than the rest of the portfolio, but what we'll do is price it at a way so that when we promote the rest of our portfolio and price those down, they will drop down to match kind of the everyday lower price that lager will be at. So that also helps with that retailer traction, where we can come in and say, hey, it's not a different price point. We're not, going after some crazy low price, but we do want the promotion schedule on this brand to be differently, so that we're essentially keeping it at that promoted price all year round and occasionally pulsing the rest of the portfolio down to meet it, which seems in kind of early conversations to get a little bit more traction from some of the chain buyers there. So, definitely a phenomenal product. It's one I'm drinking right now, and we had a lot of learnings when we initially launched that helped inform kind of how we can further shape and hone this strategy to still make sure that we're getting, a really great craft lager offering there, but in a way that can be, most successful, sell the most amount, make sure that they're making the most amount of money as possible and being most successful with it. So again, not without challenges here, but I think this particular beer highlights kind of the importance of thinking through and understanding how retailers are perceiving this product, and really being then deliberate about pricing, not just to meet the retailer's needs, but also to meet the margin needs, given the volume that you're going to do with one of these products. So I think the other learning here is, like, it's important to get some of these things out, try it, and not be scared to pivot or adjust your strategy as we learn and as we understand kind of how craft lagers are playing and competing, because we don't want to just price arbitrarily low just on the notion that we think we can compete with big beer. If that means we're leaving money on the table or not being palatable to distributors and retailers along the way, then we need to adjust and figure out the best way for craft lagers to really compete out there. And there's no one size fits all solution here, which I think you'll see as we talk through some more of these examples, but certainly a lot of learnings that we had and a lot of fun times that we had sipping on this lager. So Bri, back to you.
Yeah. So another example kind of close to home here, Colleen and I both live in North Carolina, so you're seeing some North Carolina examples pop up here, is Old North from Highwire Brewing out of Asheville. This was launched in 2020, but more as a standalone brand. So it has a separate website, a separate social media. The Highwire branding, it's a pretty big departure from that from the Highwire branding. That said, they're clearly working for a really hyper local play here. Got North Carolina flags on the label. It's red, white, and blue kind of color scheme. It does have that throwback retro branding look that a lot of the breweries that are entering this space are utilizing as a brand strategy. It's been positioned as a very approachable, well-priced premium lager brewed in North Carolina for North Carolina. It definitely is pretty close to that $1 per beer price point. I think I've seen it in Total Wines, typically around $5.99 to 6-pack. So they are definitely going very aggressive on the pricing with this brand. And Colleen and I have talked a lot about why this strategy. Why did they launch this more as a standalone? What are some of the advantage of potentially separating this a different lager brand off of your brand family, giving it very distinct branding. And I think there's certainly a few reasons why a brewery might take this approach. First and foremost, you don't want to dilute the rest of your brand by rolling out a new offering that's at a significantly lower price tier than the rest of your beer lineup. That can be certainly a little bit confusing to your wholesalers and your retailers. And there's always that association in the consumer mind, to a degree with price and quality. When you're reaching for a beer like this, you're reaching for a beer for a different occasion, different need state than you would typically reach for a craft beer. I do think it's very interesting because Highwire does still produce a lot of lagers under the Highwire brand. But this branding that they decided on for Old North definitely focuses on the local play and that really that retro throwback branding that is very popular within this space nowadays. I think that it's kind of interesting to see some of the other ways that splitting a brand off of your core lineup and your main brand family, like some of the other implications of that. One kind of random aside, while brewers love these beers and they're certainly popular, increasingly popular. It seems like they never seem to fare as well on Untapped. So there's always a lot of breweries out there that are extremely concerned or at least very cognizant of what their Untapped ratings are. Pale lager styles, lighter lager styles within craft beer do not tend to be rated as highly as some of the more hyped up styles, your hazy IPAs, your big pastry stouts, adjunct stouts, and your big fruited sours. So maybe there's some intentionality there from splitting off this lower price point kind of throwback lookalike lager and keeping it separate from your main brand. But we can only really guess at all of their motivations with this. I've definitely found that craft lagers and the recent popularity of craft lagers has come really, more and more prevalent as the craft beer market matures. We talk about strategies with these beers, trying to get consumers to trade up from domestic brands. But another way to think about these is a way of, preventing trade down. You've got a lot of craft beer drinkers that, when they're mowing the lawn or they're, out, for a long session, some late nights, they might switch to PBR or Miller High Life. If there's more options like this available, you can kind of prevent that trade down for those occasions. So there's a lot of strategies that you can attack when you're rolling out a brand like this. You just have to be very deliberate and aware of what your goals are when you're launching a product like this.
Yep. So jumping in, we'll hit on kind of the other approach that's attacking kind of the bigger beer brands, specifically attacking some of the Mexican import trends with just a few quick case studies on 3 Mexican lagers, and we'll get through these relatively quickly so that we can have time for any questions at the end. But Bri, I think you're going to start off with the first one here.
Yeah, so this one's a bit of an interesting example. Ska's Mexican Lager. This is a beer that has been brewed for over 20 years at this point. It launched in 1999. It was an early mover in the craft lager space. It was the first craft lager in cans in Colorado. And while it is a seasonal for Ska, it's their a spring or summer seasonal. In many ways, it's one of their more successful brands, and it's it's a seasonal, but it definitely has it's treated in some ways as one of their flagship offerings. Definitely, despite it being a spring and summer seasonal, the strength of this Mexican lager brand for them has inspired them to launch a lot of spin-off variants. They have a Mexican style dark lager that's available in the off season, the fall and winter. They've also rolled out a tart Mexican lager spinoff as well, and seemingly a few other dry hopped variants and other kind of probably taproom only releases. But this is a brand that I remember encountering probably a decade ago and just being really, really puzzled by. There weren't as many lagers in the craft beer space back then. I think that craft lagers have definitely kind of filled a bit of a gap that has been created kind of with the decline of American wheat beers and American blonde ales, that you just don't see those styles as much as you used to, and you're seeing craft lager kind of take up more share from those categories. But yeah, I think this is definitely an example of Ska really working to understand their consumer. This is a popular beer for them. Seasonally, it seems extremely important given the warmer weather and the region that they're located in. But yeah, this is definitely an early success story within the craft lager space.
So now jumping then to a more recent success story in the Mexican lager space is Stone's Buenaveza. And this launched initially just as a nationally, but just as a special release in 2020. It was one of the first that came out of Stone's pilot series. They had, by their mark, a very successful year one. And, now up over 300%, on pace for substantial growth in 2021. They framed this as a Baja-inspired lager, which, given their location and their home base down in SoCal, gives them some level of authenticity to start playing in this space. Sometimes I think that's a risk that folks run into with Mexican lager, is that it doesn't, stay true to their home market or what their brand's all about. And I think Stone's done a good job at being able to lean heavily into that. From a pricing perspective, they're not trying to drop the price low on this. They line it up with their core portfolio in general. Mexican imports are priced higher than the domestic premiums, and so that makes sense from that lens. It also makes sense for consistency with their core portfolio. And in terms of overall portfolio strategy, going bigger with Buenaveza really coincided with them retiring one of their other lagers, Tropic of Thunder lager. And I think, that's an indication that leaning more overtly into kind of the Mexican lager trend with the salt and lime lager and the name Buenaveza, plays into that space in a better way than maybe they were able to with Tropic of Thunder. And so again, I think a situation of being really intentional about their portfolio and trying to figure out, hey, if they're going to go big with a lager, what's their best lager play to go after? And then again, understanding their consumer and the consumer of lagers when they think about how they've branded this and how they highlight some of the flavor profile in here. And, I'm trying one of these right now, and, it's a pretty solid beer, and you certainly get that coming through. They talk about, everyone's putting lime in their, Coronas and all of that. They've got it, right in there. And I think they do it in a subtle way that stays really true to who they are. As a way for them to also, Stone's, historically such an IPA heavy brewery, and, they, like many other breweries, needs to, come up with a way to not be known for just one thing and to really expand kind of who they're able to go after. And so I think they see a lot of upside with Buenaveza, given the trends in lagers, Mexican imports, and now the growth that they're seeing with this brand. So Brad, do you want to talk about your lime lager?
Yeah, real quick. Lime lagers have certainly grown in popularity, a lot in the last couple of years. I've been, kind of surprised to see how many breweries have rolled out a lime lager. Mariachi Static was a spring seasonal, and originally it was not a beer that we brewed with lime. It was just a Mexican style lager brewed with Pilsner malt and a little bit of heirloom corn malt. But it was always a very popular seasonal for us, and would, within the taproom setting, we would sell through a lot of this beer. Customers were definitely wanting limes with it, and we had a lot of grumpy bartenders cutting limes that weren't used to that. But it certainly, there were days when this beer would outsell our IPAs. There were a lot of days when this was a top selling beer. Usually, warmer weekend days when people are out on our patio and they're looking for a more sessionable offering. We reformulated this recipe in 2021. We launched it almost at the same time, shortly after we rolled out Spratts for the first time. And the base lagers are actually, very similar. Spratts is a little bit hoppier. It uses rice malt instead of corn malt, but they are very, very close. So made the decision to kind of reformulate this as a lime lager to give it a little bit of distance from the Spratts brand, and to also play into the seasonality of this beer a little bit more. And I think this is definitely a good example of really understanding a beer's position within your portfolio. This was reformulated so that these beers weren't cannibalizing sales, from one another. But I think, the addition of lime to this beer has only made it more popular. And I think understanding both the recent popularity of lime lagers and the fact that if you roll out a lime Mexican lager 2 weeks before Cinco de Mayo, you're really hitting on some seasonality there, very short seasonality. But even after Cinco de Mayo, consumers still seem, especially in the Southeast, to go crazy for lighter offerings like this that have some nice acidity and citrus notes as well. So yeah, it's probably been more popular this year given its reformulation, and I think we're going to continue to go the route of branding this as a a lime Mexican lager moving forward, and being very conscious of its strength as one of our key seasonals in our annual lineup.
Awesome. So back to kind of the main question, right? Can craft lagers be successful? Can they compete? Bri, you want to quickly wrap us up, and then we can open it up for any questions?
Yeah. So obviously, Colleen, absolutely. In general, yes, lagers can do a lot for craft beer. There's a lot of good growth potential. They offer a great variety. They enable you to put out an approachable, lighter style that has a lot of mass appeal. They can be a good entry point for new consumers. We've been saying the same thing for years and years in this industry. It's always frustrating, that eye roll that you get when somebody walks into your tap room. What do you got that's like a Bud Light? So you're not, you can still live true to your craft brewing principles and put out, a well-crafted lager, and make for, something that has some more mass appeal and approachability from, drinkers that maybe are, a little less, intense or extreme about craft beer, that are, a little less craft loyal and regularly consume macro lagers. So these can be, styles that really do serve as a good entry point for some craft beer drinkers. On the flip side of that, they are great for seasoned craft beer drinkers as well. There is, I think, a lot of burnout within craft, palate burnout, that is, just in terms of, all these intensely flavored beers really, even people that love hazy IPAs and love all these big, big flavorful, hyped up, craft styles. They have a lot of love for lagers right now too. It's an interesting trend. I see a lot of haze breweries that also really play hard in the lager space. It's kind of a very interesting trend in recent years. But understanding that these beers offer sessionability, they can meet more occasions than craft typically doesn't excel at the beach, doesn't excel at the lake, doesn't excel as a lawnmower beer. But these craft lagers can really help us be more competitive in those spaces. And just driving home these keys to success again. We tried to exemplify them with these case studies. Being really intentional about the role and position of this beer within your portfolio, making sure you're not cannibalizing sales from another one of your core beers, understanding the potential seasonality of Mexican lagers. It's hard to sell a Mexican style lager in December. So is branding something as a Mexican lager necessarily a good way to go? That might depend on the region that you're located in. Certainly in Florida, you could probably get away with it year round. Not sure the same would be true in Massachusetts, but just be intentional and understand understand the goals of that beer within your portfolio, and understand lager consumers. What are they after? What are they looking for in terms of branding? Does this kind of retro throwback thing, is this just kind of a splash in the pan that a lot of breweries are doing, or is this something that really resonates with consumers? Understanding the implications for your retailers and your wholesalers, frankly. I know that with the Spratt's rollout, we got a lot of pressure from our wholesaler to come in at a very low price point. But then on the flip side, we've gotten pressure from some retailers that don't want to price it that low. So, be cognizant of the fact that you might be leaving money on the table, and be cognizant of the fact that, lower price tiers, maybe that warrants you, splitting off that into a standalone brand, or, you definitely have to be very aware of the implications of coming in at a very low price point, with the partnerships you have with wholesalers, retailers, and your consumers. And just definitely consider the operational implications of success. We've said this a few times. These beers take a lot more time to make. They eat up a lot more of your production capacity. Know going in that if this beer takes off, am I going to be able to support it? Have an answer to that question before you dive dive in and just go head first into the lager space, because it can be challenging. It's also challenging to potentially bring in and manage a additional yeast strain that you may not be working with in your brewery as part of your core beer offerings. So definitely be aware of some of the implications of success and some of the challenges that you'll face when you're rolling out a craft lager brand.
Awesome. But yes, we definitely they can be successful, and we want to leave what time we have left, and I think we can go over a little bit if there's plenty of questions, but want to make sure that that we're able to answer any questions that you guys have. Let's see. Trying to see if there's any questions coming in. Not seeing any right now. And we are coming up right at 5. So hopefully you guys found this helpful, interesting. There's no kind of one singular answer to the question of, what the right path is for craft lagers and how they can compete. But, we definitely see the opportunity there. And we think, ultimately considering those keys to success and really thinking through what's the right approach for your brewery, given your market, given your strategy, and using that as the basis for which you attack the lager opportunity in a way that fits for you is really the crux of it, because there's a lot of different paths to take to capitalize on this opportunity. But there's certainly, sales to be made out there, just given the dynamic of, 3 out of 4 beers being a lager. So hopefully this was helpful, and thanks for tuning in. But we'll let you guys all go now. So cheers.
Cheers.